Midnight Report.
What's up, you guys? It's late, and you should probably be asleep by now. But instead, you're here, and so am I. Welcome back to another episode of the Midnight Report, the show where unsettling stories, strange mysteries, and all the things that make you overthink everything that goes bump in the night come to life. I'm your host, Mikey Stone. And tonight, we're headed to a small town in Ohio to peel back the layers of one of the most perplexing unsolved mysteries in American true crime, the Circleville letters. Before we dive into tonight's story, I just want to say thank you so much for all of the support. It means so much to me. If you like what we do here, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It really helps me out and helps this podcast grow. And if you want to support the show more directly and get access to things like early episodes, bonus content, and a whole lot more, you can join my Patreon for members-only perks. Your support helps keeps these stories coming. You can find me on Patreon under Mikey Stone, or just click the links in my bio or down in the description below. All right, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's get into tonight's case. This story starts in the late 1970s. In the small town of Circleville, Ohio, about 25 miles of Columbus. Now, if you've never heard of Circleville, you're not alone. On the surface, it's your typical quiet Midwestern town. Just under 14,000 people live there. It's the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, or at least they think they do. But Circleville actually has kind of a strange history. The town got its name from a massive ancient earthwork that used to sit right where the city stands today. And if you're not familiar with an earthwork, that's okay, I wasn't either, I had to look this up. It's basically a large structure or pattern built by shaping the land itself, like huge mounds, walls, or geometric designs, all made from earth and stone. These things go back thousands of years, and a lot of them still baffle archaeologists to this day. I think that's super cool, super interesting. But the one in Circleville was perfectly circular, around 1,100 feet across. That's pretty cool. Eventually, though, like most things, the town grew. People wanted roads and houses and a more typical grid layout, so by the mid-1800s, all traces of that ancient earthwork were gone. But if you're like me and you believe in energy or history leaving fingerprints, maybe that strangeness never really left. These days, Circleville is probably best known for the Circleville Pumpkin Show, which is a huge fall festival that brings in thousands of people every year. But for a lot of folks, when they hear the name Circleville, they don't think of pumpkins. They think of something much darker. Because in the late 70s, this little Ohio town found itself at the center of a bizarre, terrifying mystery, one that to this day, no one has been able to explain. It all started with a letter. The mystery begins on March 3rd, 1977, when a letter addressed to Westfall High School arrived. This unassuming piece of mail would mark the beginning of one of the most bizarre and unsettling unsolved mysteries in American history, the Circleville letters case. The letter sent to Westfall High School was handwritten in crude block-style capital letters. It accused the school's superintendent, Gordon Massey, of engaging in an illicit affair with a married school bus driver from Circleville. Following day, the Westfall School Board received a similar letter repeating the accusation. Both were postmarked from Columbus, Ohio, about 25 miles away from Circleville, raising immediate questions about the sender's identity and access to local knowledge. Soon after, a bus driver named Mary Gillispie walked out to her mailbox to check the day's mail. Unaware of the letters the school had received just days before, she opened an envelope addressed to her. Inside was a handwritten note that read, "Ms. Gillispie, stay away from Massey. Don't lie when questioned about meeting him. I know where you live. I've been observing your house and know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it serious. Everyone concerned has been notified and everything will be over soon. Now, Mary was a married woman with children and her husband's name was Ron Gillespie. The letter's chilling tone made it clear whoever sent it was watching her closely. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. Not long after Mary had received her first letter, Ron received a letter demanding that he force Mary to confess her supposed affair to the school board. The letter threatened his life if he failed to do so, bluntly warning, if you don't, you will die. Mary denied the affair to Ron, but the couple kept this letter to themselves, fearing the implications. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived addressed to Ron, escalating the pressure. You have had 2 weeks and done nothing. Make Mary admit the truth and inform the school board. This letter made it clear the writer was closely monitoring their actions. At around this point, the harassment escalated beyond the mailbox. Anonymous phone calls began to plague the Gillespie home, heightening their fear. On the night of August 19th, 1977, Ron allegedly received a phone call at home that left him visibly enraged. He told his daughter the call was from the letter writer. He grabbed his gun, rushed outside to his truck, and drove off into the night. Hours later, at 10:35 p.m., Ron's truck was found crashed into a tree on a remote road. Inside, he was dead from major internal injuries. His gun lay beneath his body with one round discharged. No bullet or casing was ever recovered at the scene, adding an eerie layer of mystery. County Coroner Dr. Ray Carroll reported that Ron's blood alcohol content was 1.5 times the legal limit, and Radcliffe had ruled the death a drunk. So his death was ruled a drunk driving accident. Despite the official ruling, many residents believed Ron had been murdered, especially considering the timing and the letter writer's previous threats. Subsequent letters accused law enforcement of a cover-up, targeting officials like Sheriff Radcliffe and Dr. Carroll with allegations of corruption and abuse. From 1977 to 1979, the volume of letters exploded. Residents, teachers, business owners, and public officials received accusations ranging from infidelity to embezzlement to child abuse. The once trusting town of Circleville descended into fear and suspicion. I can't imagine what the hysteria must have been like. From the documentaries that I watched, it sounds like it was a pretty intense time. By the early 90s, hundreds of letters had circulated. Most were postmarked from Columbus, reinforcing theories that the writer operated from outside Circleville, yet possessed insider knowledge. This case took a dangerous turn on February 7th, 1983. While Mary was on her bus route driving kids near 5 Points Pike, Mary had spotted a sign on the side of the road targeting her 12-year-old daughter with graphic accusations. I won't say what was written on the sign. You guys can look it up for yourself if you want to, but it was intense and very messed up. So Mary had pulled her bus over to pull the sign out of the ground to remove it, only to discover that there was a box attached to the sign, secured with twine. She pulled the sign up and removed the box from the sign. She brought the box home and found it contained a fully functional booby trap, a loaded pistol rigged to fire when the sign was pulled. By sheer luck, the mechanism malfunctioned. Mary finally got the police involved, who then brought in investigators. Now, this is where the investigation into the Circleville letters truly begins, and we get introduced to a man named Paul Freshour, Mary's former brother-in-law. After the failed booby trap targeting Mary Gillispie was discovered on February 7th, 1983, law enforcement had their first tangible piece of physical evidence in the case, a firearm. Police took the gun to the Criminal Bureau of Investigation, where despite its serial number being partially filed off, investigators managed to trace the gun to none other than Paul Freshour, Mary's former brother-in-law. Paul Freshour was no stranger to family drama. His recent divorce from Mary's sister Karen had been bitter and acrimonious, had been bitter and acrimonious, had been bitter and acrimonious. Paul was awarded custody of their 3 children, while Karen, by many accounts resentful, ended up living in a trailer on Mary Gillespie's property. When questioned, Paul admitted that the gun was his, but claimed it had been stolen weeks prior. Curiously, he never reported the theft to police. I think we've seen this before. The investigation quickly zeroed in on Paul. His home and vehicle were searched, though no additional incriminating evidence was found. However, one of the more controversial aspects of the case emerged when investigators asked Paul to replicate the distinctive block-style handwriting used in the Circleville letters. Instead of requesting a natural handwriting sample, Paul was asked to intentionally mimic the letter writing style, a highly questionable investigative tactic by modern standards. Paul also underwent a polygraph examination, which he reportedly failed. Now, it's worth noting that polygraph results are widely regarded as unreliable and are generally inadmissible in court. Further complicating the case was Karen's direct accusation against Paul. She told investigators that he was the letter writer and claimed to have found torn-up drafts of letters in their home. However, these supposed letters were never produced as evidence, and her credibility was undermined by their contentious divorce. Despite the lack of direct physical evidence, no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses, no irrefutable proof, Paul was arrested and charged with attempted murder, based primarily on circumstantial evidence, the connection to the gun, the handwriting comparisons, the failed polygraph, and his ex-wife's testimony. Paul's trial began on October 24th, 1983, at the Pickaway County Courthouse. The prosecution leaned heavily on the booby trap and handwriting analysis. The letters themselves, though not part of the formal charges, loomed large over the proceedings, creating an atmosphere of suspicion. I always think how cool it would be to have been a juror in cases like this, especially back then. Not knowing how well known the case would become later, I think that's so interesting. Now, the defense argued that Paul had been framed, likely by someone with access to his property and belongings, perhaps Karen, who had motive and opportunity. They also pointed out that Paul had an alibi for the day of the booby trap. Was set. Home renovations were being done, placing him at home. Despite these arguments, Paul Freshour was convicted and sentenced to 7 to 25 years in prison for attempted murder. The most baffling part? The letters never stopped being sent to multiple recipients. Still containing the same threatening types of messages. Even while Paul was incarcerated under strict conditions, including solitary confinement, letters continued to pour into Circleville and surrounding areas. Many were postmarked from Columbus, Ohio, where Paul was imprisoned, but authorities repeatedly searched his cell, monitored his mail, and found no evidence he was the author. The Circleville sheriff believed 100% that Paul was still writing these letters, but the warden of the prison argues against him, saying that they had even refused to give Paul a pen or any paper. So the sheriff was pretty adamant that it was still him, that he was doing it from prison, but the warden was like, hey, we're not even giving him pen or paper. There's no way that he's doing this. It's got to be someone else. And the sheriff did not like that. This strange development raised serious doubts about Paul's guilt. If he wasn't the sole perpetrator, then who was? Was there a second letter writer? Had someone successfully framed him? Paul maintained his innocence for the rest of his life, even operating a website after his release in 1944, dedicated to clearing his name. In 1999, the case gained national attention through an Unsolved Mysteries segment. Prior to filming, the show's producers received a threatening postcard. forget Circleville, Ohio. If you come to Ohio, who else sickos will pay? The Circleville rider. That's crazy. That is so crazy. The episode aired regardless, reigniting public fascination. Paul Freshour died in 2012 at age 70, professing his innocence until his final days. Since the mid-1990s, no letters have been consecutively linked to the Circleville case. To this day, the identity of the author or authors remains an unsettling mystery, but the Circleville Police Department has stated that this case is closed. I really don't understand how these cases are being closed with like no evidence. Like, it's so crazy to me. I'm starting to see a pattern. The more that I research these cases for you guys, I'm starting to see a pattern. Sounds like law enforcement just wants to be done with it and move on. Now, there are many theories surrounding this case. I'm sure you guys can imagine. So let's talk about them and see which ones we think make the most sense. Theory 1, that Paul Freshour was the sole culprit. This was the official theory pushed by law enforcement and the prosecution. Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe believed Paul was behind everything: the letters, the booby trap, maybe even Ron's death, though Paul was never formally charged with that. The evidence: the gun used in the booby trap was tracked back to Paul. Handwriting experts at the time also claimed that Paul's writing matched the letters. And even though Paul was never charged with writing them, the prosecution leaned on those similarities in court. But here's the catch. The letters didn't stop when Paul was behind bars. In fact, they kept coming. Some even postmarked from Columbus, right where Paul was imprisoned. Prison staff swore he couldn't have sent them. They had him under tight restrictions, solitary confinement, even limited access to pen and paper. And yet, the letters continued. Theory 2, that Paul was framed. Paul himself had always said that he was set up, and a lot of people agreed with him. The main suspect in the framing theory, his ex-wife, Karen Freshour. Their divorce was, from reports, nasty. She ended up living on Mary Gillespie's property after Paul got custody of their kids. Not exactly a recipe for family harmony, right? She was also the one who pointed the finger directly at Paul and testified against him during the investigation. Now, here's where things get even more interesting, especially around the day Mary found the booby trap. Another female bus driver reported that she drove past that same spot only about 20 minutes before Mary did. She said that she saw a man standing next to a yellow El Camino parked on the side of the road, right where the sign would later appear. But when the man noticed her, he turned away and acted like he was using the bathroom, so she didn't get a good look at his face. What she did note, though, was that he was a large man with sandy-colored hair. That description does not match Paul Freshour. Paul wasn't a big guy, and he had dark hair. But guess what? Karen Freshour was reportedly dating a bigger man with sandy hair around that time, and her own brother owned a yellow El Camino. So if you're following this theory, all the puzzle pieces start to fit. The car, the man near the trap, the motive, and even the access to Paul's belongings, like the gun. It makes you wonder if Paul was the perfect fall guy for something much bigger. I think that's an interesting theory. I think it's a crazy coincidence that Karen's brother would happen to have a yellow El Camino and would happen to be dating a man who matched the description of the man that was seen at the scene. So, very interesting. I think so far that's my top one. Theory 3, David Longberry, the scorned coworker. Now this one's interesting and there's not much on this. This is kind of a brief theory, but I think it's interesting and I feel like I should mention it. Now, here's a name that doesn't come up as often in this case, but definitely deserves attention. David Longberry. He was a fellow bus driver who allegedly had a crush on Mary Gillispie. After she rejected him, things got weird, to say the least. Some believe Longberry may have started the letters out of bitterness or jealousy, and years later, Longberry went on the run after being convicted of sexually assaulting a child. So yeah, not exactly a stand-up guy. That said, though, there's no direct evidence linking him to the Circleville letters. Still, his name keeps popping up in independent investigations, so I thought that was Very interesting, and thought I should just slip that one in there for you guys. Theory 4, a group conspiracy. Investigative journalist Martin Yant uncovered a plausible scenario where multiple people orchestrated the campaign. Supporters of this theory note how the letters continued from prison and targeted a wide range of people, suggesting a network of insiders. I tried to look more into this one. There really wasn't much. I think that it's a good theory, though. I think that it's a possible theory. I mean, this is one of those cases, again, just kind of like last week's, where I think that anything is possible at this point. Theory 5. A controversial but increasingly discussed theory suggests that Mary Gillispie herself may have played a role in the Circleville letters, either as the sole author or as someone orchestrating parts of the mystery to serve a personal agenda. Supporters of this theory point to inconsistencies in Mary's statements. While she initially denied having an affair with school superintendent Gordon Massey, she later admitted to a relationship, but claimed it started only after the letters began and after Ron had died. Critics argue that the affair may have started earlier, and the letters could have been a calculated way to shift public scrutiny or deter anyone from exposing her. Some believe Mary may have crafted the narrative of being a victim to protect herself or manipulate public perception. That's a lot of work, and that goes deep. Dramatizations on shows like Drunk History helped popularize this theory, but it has been circulating in online forums and true crime circles for years. Importantly, there is no concrete evidence tying Mary to the letters or to the booby trap. Her story has remained largely consistent for decades, and many still view her as the target, not a perpetrator. Still, the idea that she may have had deeper involvement remains one of the most debated angles of the case. And the last theory, that this was a law enforcement cover-up. Some locals still believe the investigation was rushed or biased to protect prominent figures like the sheriff or school officials. I mean, it is a small town. I grew up in a small town. I kind of get where people are coming from with that. Letters accused Sheriff Radcliffe and Dr. Carroll of corruption and child abuse, but official channels moved quickly to pin everything on Paul. So let's do a quick little recap. Some people think that Paul Freshour was the sole culprit. I think that it's weird how the gun was traced to him. I think it's weird how he did not report the gun as stolen. I did just watch a documentary. It was the 48-hour documentary. I think it came out last year in 2024, where they had a handwriting analyst reanalyze the letters and the handwriting now. And she said 100% without a doubt, she knows that the letters were written by Paul. So I think that that's interesting. Some people think that Paul was framed. This is hugely believed by the public, a lot of Paul's supporters, family. It is strange how that bus driver, 20 minutes before Mary went down that road on her route with the kids, saw a man with a different build, different description than Paul. I think that maybe if Paul had reported the gun stolen, he might not have looked so bad. But unfortunately, he didn't. There's no direct proof of this, though. This is all just conspiracy, of course. Now, his ex-wife, Karen, I can only imagine how upset she was. She had to leave their home, move into a trailer on Mary's property, while Paul got custody of the kids. I wouldn't be happy. I definitely wouldn't go out of my way to do something like this, but you never really know what's truly going on in somebody's mind, right? So let's say that she did get her current boyfriend to do this, to frame Paul. It sounds like a lot of work, but if someone's truly that mad and they're willing to do anything to get revenge, I wouldn't put it past someone. I think this is one of my top theories. Then you've got David Longberry. We mentioned him briefly, but he was that bus driver that Mary turned down. Things got awkward. Now, he did end up having a criminal history later on, so he definitely could have been someone who might have been capable of doing something like this, so we can't put it past him, but he's mentioned so briefly, and this is just an independent theory from independent reporters. This isn't a huge public theory, but it's definitely weird timing. Some people think it was a group conspiracy. A lot of investigative journalists think that this was a group conspiracy. This could explain the volume of letters, how many letters were being sent to so many people, and how there were so many varied targets. It's strange how the handwriting was all the same, though. I don't really know if I believe that. And no confirmed group has been identified. Now then you've got the theory that Mary Gillispie was the author of the letters to kind of try and save her ass. And I'm not sure that I believe that. I can see how people would think that, especially since she came out about the affair later, but she states that the affair wasn't an affair and that she genuinely started a relationship with the superintendent of the school after Ron had died, which I think that's weird. I don't think I'd be starting a relationship with someone who I had been accused of having an affair with, especially in letters and word that I got around town. Like, I don't know. It just sounds really messy to me. And that's not something that I would do. But hey, everybody's different. Do you, girl? Go marry as long as you're happy. I don't really believe in this theory as much, but I can see why people think that. I also don't know how she would have gotten Paul's gun unless she worked with Karen to get Paul's gun and help stage the whole thing. Now, we could go deeper into that. That would be crazy if the two of them worked together to do it, to frame Paul. Because maybe Mary needed an out. Maybe Mary needed something that was going to take all the eyes off of her and onto somebody else, right? And Karen really had nothing to lose. She was living in a trailer in the back of Mary's property, lost the custody of her kids, lost her husband. And really, from what I read, it was not a good divorce. It was nasty. There were lots of tie-ups. It was not good. Her and Paul were both very hurt. So I think that would be an interesting theory, but I didn't really see anything about that. But now that I'm thinking and the wheels are turning, that's interesting. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about that. I think that's actually that could be possible. But do I think that Mary was the sole perpetrator? No, not at all. And others think that this was a law enforcement cover-up. Now, I grew up in a small town where law enforcement, I have questioned their intentions. It's a little sketch. Anyone else from a small town, I'm sure you can agree. But this is just speculated by local critics and some case analysis, not by many people. I think things that kind of make this possible is that it was a quick case closure. I think that they really rushed to close this case without really looking any further. My final thoughts, I think Paul wrote the letters. I think he did it. I want to believe that he was framed. I think that that's just an interesting theory and just makes my conspiracist mind go like crazy. But after going through everything, it is clear that this case is a real puzzle. Paul Freshour was convicted, but the letters didn't stop. That alone makes you question whether he acted alone or at all. The ongoing threats, the booby trap, the fear that gripped this small town, it all points to something bigger or more complicated than a single person's vendetta. What stands out is how this mystery affected an entire community for years, turning friends and neighbors suspicious of one another. And even now, decades later, no one really knows who the author of those letters were. The case is officially closed, but the questions still linger. It's a reminder that sometimes the truth isn't straightforward, and even official answers don't always tell the whole story. I think it's so interesting how a case can be considered closed without official evidence or detailed answer. Like, that just blows my mind. Thank you so much for joining me tonight to talk about the strange story of the Circleville letters. If you found this case interesting and want to hear more unsolved mysteries, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like, comment, share, and subscribe. It really helps the show grow and reach more curious minds like yours. And if you want to support this podcast even more, check out my Patreon. There you'll get exclusive content like early access to episodes and a chance to help shape future episodes. I really take what you guys share with me on there into consideration. I would love to hear more from you guys about what unsolved mysteries, true crime stories, whatever that you guys want me to cover. Let me know down in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you next week. Good night.